Hello, welcome to School Committee Update with Sarah Phillips, Ward 3 School Committee member. Hi, Sarah, over there. I'm Sarah
Hi.
Fishman for Maximum Confusion. How are you doing? You're on Prospect Hill, right?
I'm hanging in there. I'm COVID fine, as people would say.
Well, that's good. That's good. That will, I think, be our theme for today. If there's something else that you think we need to focus on, maybe at the end interject that so we don't miss it. But I want to just start with talking to you about yourself and your profile as a school committee member. So how many terms have you been on? How many years have you been on the committee?
This is my first term, the end of my first year.
Wow. Okay. But you have a very long, illustrious, varied education background. Um, Can you maybe just sort of give a recap of that a little bit?
Yeah, I'd say with the exception of about 2 years working primarily in transportation organizing, my entire career has either been directly in education or at the intersection of schools and communities. I started my career as a classroom teacher, teaching English as a second language in the Oakland Public Schools. And from there, I worked in juvenile hall in Alameda County, where I ran a reading program for high school students. I left the classroom because I really felt like even if I were the best teacher in the world, which I certainly was not at that point, the system was still going to fail my kids, who I cared about deeply, and I wanted to change the system. So I took jobs that were mostly at the intersection of schools and communities. I led a community planning process that involved students and parents and teachers in the design of one of Oakland's first community schools. And the idea was to have a multi-service social service agency kind of attached and embedded in schools.
Mm-hmm.
I had a great job working for the Forum for Youth Investment, where they flew me all around the East Coast, helping communities improve the quality of the out-of-school time programs that they offered to kids. I was the program director at City Year Rhode Island, the program and service director, where I helped them expand the range of services that they offer to schools to include mentoring, in-school tutoring, in addition to their kind of traditional after-school offerings. I decided to, along the way, I got an MSW from the University of Michigan. So professionally, I'm really rooted in social work, and I'm a community social worker. But I went back to school to get my PhD because at City Year, I really felt like we were doing all of these fantastic things, but I really couldn't tell if they were actually making a difference for kids. And I wanted the skills to know if what we do in the field is really working for kids. So I got a PhD in social policy from the Heller School at Brandeis. And since getting my PhD, I've been working primarily in research. So I spent about 6 years at an organization called Tripod Education Partners, which is a spinoff of Harvard's Achievement Gap Initiative. And our work there really focused on helping schools and districts understand teachers and students and parent perceptions of what's happening in their schools so that they can improve them. Now I'm in just about a year and a half into a job as the director of research at a place called Mass Insight Education and Research. Sorry, we always call it Mass Insight, so I forget the full name sometimes. And my work there is really focused on both helping folks use data to improve the programs that we offer schools and districts in Massachusetts and around the country, and doing research that will inform the field on things like what are the college outcomes of students who take advanced placement courses, for example.
Wow, that's a lot. So your day job and your school committee job make you're just talking education all the time. And you also have 3 children, is that right?
I have 3 children. Yeah, one of them's dead, but yeah, I have 2 at home.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought you.
That's okay.
Okay.
For me, I think the only way to parent a child who's died is to talk about them and own them. So it's important for me to share her as part of my life.
Oh, that explains my confusion when I was reading. I'm sorry to hear that. The son you have who made pickles. If you people put things on Facebook, I think it's fair game. So,
Fair?
was that something? I'm trying to do a good segue here from my being embarrassed. Uh, what has been the greatest challenge for you as a parent during this COVID remote learning experience? I mean, are your kids in Somerville Public Schools, or are they?
My daughter she's in 4th grade, and my son is 4, so he's in preschool and he goes to a daycare.
Okay.
That's not the Somerville Public School.
Okay, so you have one school-age child who is doing remote learning, right? Okay, so how is that just going for you as a parent? And would you, based on that experience, what would you say to other parents about doing or not doing?
That's a really good question. So I would say my family's experience with remote learning is very dependent on both the fact that my husband and I have work from home jobs right now. So we're around all the time, right? It's very different from a family where the parents have to go out of the house to work. The second thing is that our daughter is a really self-directed kid. She just has the self-management skills to organize her time, to get on Zoom when she needs to do her homework with very little urging from us. So we have it really easy in terms of the big picture. And yet, I think what I am struck with over and over is that we are extremely privileged, and this is still very, very hard. Yeah. My daughter, as much as her teacher and school is trying so hard, she hates Zoom school. I think one of the things that's
sorry, she hates what?
Zoom school.
Oh, Zoom school. I haven't heard it called that, which is perfectly reasonable way of calling it, but yeah.
Yeah.
What does she hate?
I think the biggest thing for her that's really hard is that doing school remotely, at least the way that she's been exposed to it, there's no opportunity for social interaction.
Yeah. And this is interesting because one of the things you list as an area of interest or expertise is student engagement. So how does one, either as a parent or as an educator, how does one foster any sort of student engagement when people are not even in the same place? Yes. Are there things that you've been able to come up with, or other school committee?
You know, I've learned a lot from my husband, who's a college professor, and so we talk about this all the time. And one of the things that I encouraged him to do that seems like it worked really well is to start each day with a check-in, right, to center students emotionally where they're at. And to a certain extent, my daughter's teachers have absolutely tried that, but I wonder about the extent to which, you know, the college-age kids that my husband works with were able to be very vulnerable and really direct about how they were feeling, and he was able to create a climate of that. I'm not sure you can do that in a 4th grade class, first of all. And so it's been really hard. And it seems like morning meeting is just this one tiny opportunity that they've really had to talk to each other. And part of this is structural, right? So I believe, and I believe the district made a decision not to allow breakout rooms for children below high school without an adult present.
So now by breakout rules, just so I make sure I understand, you mean breakout rules online?
Breakout rooms in Zoom, you know, you can press the button and you kind of go into a small group, right, and you can talk to a small group of people. So there's a decision not to do that unsupervised in order to support kids and make sure they're treating each other respectfully. Mm-hmm. But without significant parent volunteers or additional teacher support, then it just means that opportunity to talk in a small group where you might have more conversation just doesn't happen. But I'm just speaking about my own experience, not the broader experience. I think in general, what I've been hearing from parents and what seems to be true from looking at remote learning across the country is that it is absolutely working for a subset of students, right? Students who are super self-directed seems to be working for. Students who the regular classroom environment is really distracting and really difficult to manage, Zoom school also seems to be working for them. But for a lot of kids, high needs special education students, English language learners, very young kids who can't read, it's impossible. You just can't do these things.
I've asked other school committee members, how do you teach reading if you're, I know there are ways of doing it, but it seems so contrary to the old fashioned whatever, looking at the word with another person, hearing the word, looking at the word, holding the book, So what have other neighbors or constituents or other people have said to you about the remote learning? Somerville is all remote learning right now. Mm-hmm. So I guess my first question is, what is your feeling about that? Is that just personally, I know you can't speak for the whole committee and that things are going to change and all that, but what is your opinion on all learning being virtual at this point in Somerville?
Yeah, I have a lot of opinions, so hopefully I'll be coherent. One thing is, I think when we have a remote school, we're pushing up. So let me take a step back, right? One reason to have remote school is because you think in-person school isn't safe, right? Mm-hmm. And the science is telling us that with the right level of mitigation, in-person school is actually safe. And it may be safer than remote school in the sense that when we are remote, we're pushing the risk. The risk is not in our schools, but the risk comes from, for example, my colleague Willem Bott was telling me about, his family. They've got people coming in to supervise his preschooler doing preschool on Zoom. So they're opening themselves up to another person coming into their house. A lot of families are sending their very young kids or their older kids to do remote learning in a child care center, for example, the Y or the Elizabeth Peabody House. Now, if we talk about COVID transmission being related to ventilation and building safety, the Y is an extremely old, crumbling building. It just doesn't feel safer to me than our schools, which even with no mitigation, right? We're doing, I think it's $7 million worth of HVAC upgrades in the schools. It might be $5 million. But even without that, my sense is that the ventilation in the schools is safer than places like the Y.
Well, to back up for a second, I know Will, he's a city councilor at large, and I think he has 2 children. And I believe, at least last I knew, that both he and his wife have full-time jobs. So this really speaks to, what a family's level of resources will really, really make an impact on how remote or safe or whatever things can be. So that was just one thought I had. So is there anything that should be done differently than is being done now? The school system can't say you're not allowed to go to this external, other institution. Is there an argument for going for some in-person experience now? Maybe I should ask, are any students in the classroom, are there any special needs or English language learners or other considered highest needs students in the classroom now, or is it completely shut down?
My understanding is that Somerville is one of 2 communities in the state that has no students learning in person.
Wow. What's the other one?
I'm not sure.
So, and I haven't checked the numbers lately, but I think Somerville is usually in that middle amber category of with regard to level of positive COVID testing, not in a red area of more concern. So does that surprise you that based upon the COVID numbers that the Somerville system is one of only two that's fully remote? Does
It
that
doesn't.
surprise you?
It doesn't. I think what I have not done a good job of, I think, where I wish the school committee and city would go next is to be able to say to our constituents very clearly and to our educators very clearly, this is how we know our buildings are safe. This is how we know our plans are working. And until we can do that, I worry that there will continue to be a lot of conflict around bringing kids back to school in person.
Right. And at the risk of comparing things that should perhaps not be compared, Boston recently, just this weekend, negotiated with its teachers union a plan for going back to classroom teaching, and with all sorts of provisos of this can change depending on how the numbers are. But is there, I'm not even sure what my question is what you've just described one of the challenges in union district agreement on how to move forward, or is it something separate, sort of more philosophical almost?
I'm new at this, so I'm learning what I could say publicly.
Okay.
I will say that the union has very clearly stated a desire for thresholds for community-based metrics of COVID-19 transmission to be used to make opening and closing decisions about our schools. Science and scientific guidance is really saying community-based thresholds are not what you should be using to make decisions. You should be looking at in-school transmission and the extent to which your in-school transmission, as in somebody gets COVID from somebody else in
Right.
school, and you should be looking at how well you're actually implementing all your strategies around infection control.
So when you speak of community standards, are you talking about COVID numbers for the community at large? Is that what you're talking about?
The two most popular are number of cases per 100,000 in the past 14 days and number of, or percent of positive cases. Sorry, percent of positive tests in the past 14 days.
Okay. And so you're saying those aren't necessarily the metrics that are most helpful to look at?
That's what scientists and experts are telling us.
Okay. So a lot of this, well, there are two problems. Well, there are a lot of problems. A lot of challenges. For you personally, so what would you, if you were the grand poobah of all that is education in Somerville, what would you push for? What would you move toward? Even if you can't change it all, even if your poobah status is somewhat limited, what would you focus on to move kids back into the classroom if that's the goal?
I think first, if I'm the grand poobah and I can do whatever I want, I would work with the other regions around Somerville and Somerville to roll back reopening decisions that aren't related to our kids in schools, right? And I would making it safe and making everyone feel safe for kids to go to school the top priority. I think that would be the first thing that I would do. The second thing is, I'm not sure I can talk about the rest of what I would do. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. So let's shift things a little bit, make it a little more concrete. Have teachers come up to you, or have you heard of teachers saying that there are some very explicit things that are of concern to them, and that you've then brought back and people have discussed on the committee?
Yeah, I think there's a lot that teachers are concerned about, and rightly so, right? I think one concern, a critical concern, is lack of transparency. How are we going to make these decisions? How are we going to know that things are working? Another concern is just about implementation, right? So, for example,
Well, if I can interject,
yeah,
there's the 20-page document on the school website that describes, I guess, movement toward in-classroom instruction. And I did not read it verbatim, but I didn't see anything specific that really addressed how are we going to get there, or when are we going to get there. It was just not very specific to me. So is that one of the...
That's right. Working conditions under hybrid learning is something that's negotiated under Massachusetts law. And so we obviously want educators' input into what that looks like. Our plans will be better with educator input because they're on the ground, and that has to happen. And I think rightly so, the district has been reticent to put out what it thinks is best without teachers signing off and saying, yeah, this is right. I think some of the concerns are related to what good teaching looks like, right? Hybrid learning is really no substitute for fully in person. And how to do hybrid teaching for some kids and remote teaching for others, that's kind of a logistical nightmare. Or, for example, our buildings aren't all going to be ready at the same time. We can't open all of our buildings. And so kids are going to have to move.
Yeah.
And who moves and who stays and what does that mean for a parent or a kid is really, really difficult. And then also, it's scary, right? It's scary to think that you might go to work and you might get sick, right? I hear this a lot from doctors, right? And they talk about the fear that they had in March about getting called back to work and how scared they were, and how the experience of being in work and seeing that the safety measures that they put in place, their masks, social distancing, seeing that worked, helped them feel comfortable being at work. But until they went back to work, they were just terrified. They all say, I was terrified. I'm talking about doctors.
Doctors, okay.
Right? But I think the same feelings are probably similar, right?
Okay, well, we're running a little low on time, and I feel like I've unfortunately led you in several different directions at the same time, and I apologize. So back to your PUBA status. If there is a hybrid model that's adopted, what would you kind of want that to look like? If that were something that the committee agreed should happen. There's so many models right now. There's 1 week off, 1 week in classroom. There's the Boston recently negotiated plan. I think it's 2 days in classroom and then 3 days is remotely to keep people socially distanced. So do you have a favorite model or approach to constructing one?
Mm-hmm. So Somerville's model for most kids is similar to Boston's in that kids will be in class for 2 days, off for 3, except for high needs special education students and English language learners who will be in school 4 days with a cleaning
However,
day.
Boston already has, granted a low percentage, but they have 2,000 kids in classroom who fit the descriptions. Whereas from what you've said, we don't have any.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, I think probably the model of 1 week on, 1 week off works better for kids and teachers. But I think the 2 days on, 3 days off consistency every week may work better for parents. It seems to work better for our testing schedule, right? We can test on Tuesday. Somerville. So aside from the Los Angeles Unified School District, I've been unable to find any district in the country that is going to implement the level of testing, COVID-19 baseline surveillance testing that Somerville is. And I just say that as a precursor to, so we're doing 2 days on, 3 days off. Testing will happen on Tuesdays. So by the time anyone might come back to the classroom on Thursday, they will already have their test results and know whether
So
they
how
need to
often
quarantine.
would they be tested? How often?
So teachers are going to be tested twice a week, Tuesdays and Fridays, I believe. Students who are in high need special populations will also be tested twice a week. And the rest of the students will be tested once a week.
So as a basis for comparison, my son goes to Northeastern and he is tested every 3 days. He is home for vacation and he drives down to Northeastern or whatever, bikes, and is tested every 3 days. And students who are not in the area, when they come back, they will have to have 3 negative tests in a row in order to be anywhere other than their own dorm room. So I am only saying this because it is really hard to say what is enough or what is too much, or, I mean, does that strike you as the right amount or not? The Somerville schedule.
I don't know about the right amount. What I'm really excited about is that there will be baseline and surveillance testing in Somerville, which is vastly different than nearly every other school district around the country, right? I have a friend who works in Chelsea, right? As a teacher, she has access to optional testing, right? That she could opt into at her school. In other districts, teachers don't even have that. And students, absolutely no surveillance testing. There may be some rapid testing for symptomatic students, but nothing for asymptomatic students.
So pardon me, to make sure I understand, surveillance testing refers to testing everyone?
Sorry. It's testing kind of on a weekly basis.
Okay.
Right? It's let's see what's happening in the population.
As opposed to based on someone appearing symptomatic.
Mm-hmm. Or you just randomly decide to get tested.
Okay. All right. So we don't have a whole lot of time left. Is there something other than COVID or some different aspect of COVID or some announcement that you would like to make or offer? And if not, I'll bother you with more questions.
For me, like, this school year has been all pandemic all the time. I really appreciate all the hard work that everyone in our community is doing and all the sacrifices that everyone is making to try to do right for our kids. And that's what I think is most important.
That's good. Okay, I think we only have like a minute left, so I will say this has been School Committee Update with Sarah Phillips. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.